Welcome to this Times Techies webinar. I'm Akhil George, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. The two of us will moderate this discussion. In today's webinar, we are discussing problem-solving skills for engineers in the era of AI. We're doing this webinar in association with Avalara. Avalara reduces the hassle and complexity of tax compliance at every stage, no matter the industry or size of your business. To discuss this topic, we have two distinguished panelists. We have Masa Karahashi, SVP of Engineering at Avalara, and we have Aditya Kulkarni, VP of Engineering at Dun& Bradstreet. The field of AI is undergoing rapid advancements, necessitating engineers to adapt and refine their problem-solving approaches. It is revolutionizing traditional methodologies across various engineering domains, presenting both challenges and opportunities. This session aims to empower engineers by exploring the integration of AI tools and techniques into their existing workflows. Attendees will gain insights into the critical role AI plays in contemporary engineering practices and acquire essential AI literacy. They will learn effective strategies for combining their human intuition with AI-driven solutions to really optimize problem-solving processes. The session will also showcase real-world examples that demonstrate the successful application of AI in tackling complex engineering challenges. By participating in this session, we hope engineers will be better prepared to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of AI technologies and their profound impact on problem-solving strategies. They will gain the knowledge and skills necessary to remain at the cutting edge of innovation in the AI era. Masa Karahashi, SVP of Engineering at Avalara, leads Avalara's engineering teams responsible for e-invoicing, global integrations, and licensing. He has a wide range of prior leadership experiences at Oracle and Siebel, as well as a number of startup companies. He's an accomplished global leader with a focus on delivering software at scale in all forms, cloud, on-premises, and appliances. Masa also serves on several boards of startups and nonprofit organizations. Welcome, Masa.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We have with us Aditya Kulkarni. Aditya Kulkarni is VP of Engineering at Dun & Bradstreet. He has 24 years of experience in ad tech, media, and technology, and has led transformation growth strategies for venture and PE-backed software companies. Currently, as VP of Engineering at DNB, he oversees global advertising technology to help advertisers reach the right customers. Prior to DNB, Aditya was VP of Technology at PubMatic, where he built mobile and video advertising solutions. He's also the co-founder of several startups, including the digital OOH ad tech pioneer Lemma Technologies, AI startup Amplify Reach, and Social Mobile. Those of you who are viewing this can send in your questions to the Facebook comment box. Akhil and I will put them to Masa and Aditya. Masa and Aditya, welcome to today's Times Techies webinar.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Coming to you, Aditya, how has AI transformed the landscape of problem solving in engineering over the past few years?
This is spectacular to see overall how AI has grown. I remember early days of my college when we were looking at the earlier versions of the AI, which was based on a standard clustering and tokenization and supervised. Very simply put, when, for example, recruiting anyone, we look at the resume and we say that this is relevant and this is not relevant. This is the minimal level of a classification that one can face. And from there, it can get into automatically learning different type of a system and different objects for which you have trained or not trained. So that is a unsupervised learning. Now that brings us to current era of a generative AI, where it has not only taken cadence of how to understand whether it is a language, whether it is an image, but it also allows to predict. So when example, I'm doing my introduction, I will be saying I'm boy, then I am. After that, how much probability of a word coming boy versus girl, or if I'm describing like what kind of a color I like, blue, red, and so on. So that probability can be kind of dealt with through how much data you can feed. And the generative AI have made impossible thing possible. That is a World Wide Web connected data at a very massive scale that has come in. Very different computer science algorithms from recurring neural network to transformers have helped this, and it has created opportunity for generative AI. Complexity of that has now turned to very, very sophisticated not requiring too much technical education through generative AI platforms like OpenAI or Anthropic, which anybody can use. Practically, you go and you can download a mobile app interfacing with these systems, and you can start to ask any general question, or even Google or Microsoft Bing provides that information, which is fantastic to see how it is getting. So first step is getting access to those tools. That is now in possible realm of everyone, and engineers being one of the smart people who will definitely try to use it. I think that is where the opportunity lies to get it ahead with new type of a learning. I think, and that's where Masa can add more to dimension of a specific how engineers can get into Masa. So you may have to add few for it.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely talk about the usage of generative AI specifically by engineers a little bit later today. But just to kind of transition the conversation back to the topic of problem solving, right? And how does that apply to use of Gen AI? I definitely think the emergence and wide adoption of Gen AI has really, it's so easy to use, right? Or feels so easy to use. And the answers can be very complicated, sophisticated, and it has really accelerated many engineers' ability to solve problems. But because it's so easy to use, and a lot of people can use it, I think it's created a new category of problems, really because of some shortcomings of generative AI that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, specifically around the concept of hallucinations that we'll talk a little bit later about in the session today.
Mhm. We can also look at what are some of the practical ways engineers can start integrating these AI tools into their existing workflows? Is there some case studies any of you have?
Let me take this question. So anything that you want to solve, right? So it's not fitting the solution to the problem. It's more of a starting with a problem itself. So when you start with that mindset, then you have to first understand the role with which you need to understand the AI. And then it could be applied to developing the skills that will be there. So if I start with first role, that is something I call it as a category of a founders or innovators or product owners will have. They're responsible for defining what is the problem that they need to solve. So when they decide about problem that they need to solve, they will be looking at a pioneering new solution, which is a step one towards getting any application, whether you want to apply AI or you don't. Next is builders or software engineers, developers, or operators. It is about adopting AI in the workflow. It could be your existing AI that is getting automated, or it could be completely rapidly new thing that you want to build or bring ideas to cost-effective usage. For example, you could be a medical student and you are looking at any dataset modifications on X-rays. Then you can generate very well awareness about what human can miss at a massive scale, because we have those electronic data sets which can be input, and you can generate a system which can predictably tell that, yes, this is something anomaly that is found in the X-ray versus not. Those kind of systems could be built. So that is the job of somebody who takes concept from innovator or product owner and builds that. Next is understanding the realm where this gets applied. And that is where the most important part is ethics and compliance, because AI brings a lot of things to the table, but is it getting used responsibly? Does it have a bias? Does it have anything? That's something it is important to understand. And once that ethically and legally is compliant and something that is ready for the world, that is where I think you can get to the building and integrating AI into your workflow.
Masa, any thoughts?
Yeah. And adding to what Aditya said, I definitely think the very first thing that is the most important is for anybody to just simply gain experience using generative AI, right? I mean, you can definitely try to understand it conceptually and understand how it works in theory and what the algorithmic inner workings of generative AI is, but there's nothing better than just go use it. Just go use it, right? And so if nothing else, just go to OpenAI and create a free account and start using ChatGPT and just start, like, literally, you can just start talking to it. right? I remember when this was starting to become popular, and that's exactly what I did. I went to I went to OpenAI, created a free account, and I just started talking about Star Trek, like one of my favorite shows. And I was asking Gen AI and talking to Star Trek about the impact that show has had on society and some of the inventions that came out of the show. And it's very intriguing to be able to talk to an AI of something like this. It's like you can't do that in the past with like a Google or ML model or anything of that nature. But with Gen AI you can. But as I was interacting with it, even in my very first usage of trying to use it, I realized there's a pattern of behavior of how Gen AI works. And I bring this memory up because the more I just use it, the more I start realizing, I start developing a sense of pattern on how does it work, and what are the limitations, and what is it really good at. And then once I started understanding that, like Aditya said, in the context of my role, I started then thinking about, oh, what are some of the places in my daily activity that I can really incorporate the use of Gen AI for me to use it as an acceleration into what I do in my job. So, and sort of in the context of people's role, I think how it fits is going to be very different, right? So, for example, if you're an engineer, and you're struggling with maybe for just a few random examples I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe if you have a large data set that you have to go interpret, right, or a large amount of text, right, you could just as easily feed all of that into Gen AI and say, hey, summarize this for me into a set of cliff notes. Or maybe you're trying to understand a concept behind a set of code or something. You could feed into it and say, ask it to summarize what the code is doing. Um, you could take a piece of code that you've written and try to and use it as acceleration to refine and optimize the code that you've written. I think there's a lot of different ways in which you can use it. But again, there are going to be limitations to the output, and it's really critical that you look at the output with critical thinking and say, what is this doing? What is this telling me? And is this right or is this wrong? And be able to use the output in the way that is useful to you, instead of just blindly taking the output saying, oh yeah, this must be right, let's go with it.
Maybe we can touch on what are some of the common challenges engineers face and how can they overcome them. Masa, you
Yeah.
mentioned hallucination. I'm guessing that's a huge one.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to come back to exactly the
Mm.
hallucination I mentioned earlier. And so when using generative AI, concept of generative hallucination is really, really important to understand. And we can talk about the causes of hallucination, right? Data quality from biases in the training model, handling noise, missing values of the inherent uncertainty and probabilistic language models, and blah, 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 blah. And again, the inner working of how generative AI works. But really, what is hallucination? Hallucination is just a fancy word for when Gen AI is lying to you, right? And the problem is when it lies to you with an output, it does it so convincingly, and it will generate the output to you that looks so right. It's tempting as a user to say, oh yeah, okay, this looks good, let's go with it. Which comes back to it's funny, right? You gotta be a subject matter expert in the subject that you are actually using generative AI to know when hallucination is occurring to you. And then be able to, using your knowledge, apply the critical thinking on the output to say, okay, what do I do with this? Right? Is this right? Is this not just is it right or is it wrong? How can I use this output in a way that is useful to the goal that I'm trying to achieve?
Aditya?
Yeah. So once you have understood that there's a hallucination and there are going to be challenges, then you are essentially accepting that this is not a generic solution to everything. And that is where I think your first initial step towards the right solution starts. Now, once you understood problem and you understand the limitation of the system, of course, it is very, very wide and very, very smart. So once you understood, next step comes is thinking about the integration. And that is where you need to understand why you are doing it. Your problem statement has articulated that But you also need to consider different aspect, which is the cost of adopting this solution. So you just Google and you will find any of this solution is provided to you and me as a API. Even if you adopt, let's say, open source, then it has a limitation in terms of hosting requirements and other GPUs that you need to build and train. Uh, Everything points to dollars, and doing that as a study or research is a very different thing versus using it in a commercial application. For example, today you go to any report and your bank statement gets shown, or you are looking at some different data where your performance of a mutual fund or anything coming up. Same tool could be enhanced by AI, where you can get a natural language prompt and you can start to chat with it to extrapolate data. Now consider that solution is for every customer, then it will kind of increase total number of queries to the backend where it will try to aggregate the data and so on. So it complicates the overall thing, and that is the cost which needs to be justified. And that is where the product and other teams will come to play, which will help to define, yes, whether we are going to be a cost effective in using that. So that becomes one of the key criteria. And second one is build from your own open source stack versus do it inside the company. So it is a intersection between technology and your legal. Many of these companies, OpenAI and other things, they will be within their cloud. They will have a certain level of legal and other type of applications. So irrespective whether you're using it for software development, you are using it for any other medical or industrial application, you will have that kind of a convenience when you're talking with this OpenAI or Anthropic and those kind of a companies. Same time, if you have a great team inside engineer, you want to build vertical AI, which is focused and tuned for your own and which amazes your customer experience, you can still think about that while keeping that cost. Again, all the things will boil down to your end challenge, that is compliance with regular laws, standards, and ethic that is required. We all know, if you forget about OpenAI, which is even complex, even on Google search, you can find kind of unsettling answers to very simple questions and image search and all that, and which is not very in a distant past. It has happened for political figures and other things, which kind of puts into jeopardy when your legal or compliance reviews that. So that is where what Masa said in terms of hallucination and its own training data set biases, we need to be aware and do that testing so that ethics and your legal and compliance can actually pass it so that it can come to serve your end customer. So those are the things I trust will be common challenges. That's something. But if you look at it from the macro perspective, we're talking about a few new skills. I think as we discussed in the next few minutes, we'll understand that these are going to help. So attention to detail, understanding that is number one priority. Talking and getting feedback from stakeholders is going to be another. So those two, and cost imperatives are the third one I will give it as a takeaway.
This question is to both of you. As engineering heads, how do you set up your teams to leverage AI tools? Masa, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I can't talk about details, but at Avalara, for example, we have a very specific goal for a certain portion of our engineering organization to adopt and use AI within the next certain time period. And now, how is AI being used? It really, going back to what Aditya was talking about a little bit earlier, it really depends on what is the role of the person within the organization and what are they trying to accomplish. Now, and then there are sort of the legal and ethical boundaries that's been mentioned a couple of times in terms of what can we do using Gen AI within the context of a enterprise company. Right. But what I think is really important for any engineering leader or any engineer, any individual in an engineering organization, is really be thoughtful about what how can I use generative AI in the context of my role, taking into account what is Gen AI good at doing and what are the limitations. And going back to some of the problems that we already talked about earlier in terms of how it could mislead you and actually create new problems for you if you're not thoughtful about it.
Aditya?
Yeah, I think I will ride on what Masa said. I will like anybody to be excited about a generative AI, be curious, be more like kids, try to identify what are the use cases. But the minute you feel that, okay, there is something interesting, then start with your why you are going to use that to solve any problem. So do remember, Gen AI or not, your any problem solving, once you identify that problem, stays the same. You have to define the problem, you have to ideate the solution, build a prototype, test that, implement that, and you have to do it rapidly until you come to viable model with which you can actually build. Same thing I trust applies to applying AI as well. As Masa said sometime back, that you will have to play with it, you will have to ask question, whether it is a Star Trek or anything. If you are going to do it, then that provides a basis for you to get acquainted with the system, find it few answers right way. Even when we use our standard search offering, we find that, okay, somebody finds answer faster, somebody finds it later. So that kind of a skill you need to develop in a colloquial sense, how to use those AI. And from there, you can use one of these traits, existing platforms. You need to kind of familiarize with more like OpenAI is one, or you go to Google platform, then you have Vertex AI, those kind of a things. If you are a software technology company, then you may even look at a beyond Gen AI and look at a Tensor or PyTorch existing stacks. Those are there because you're looking at a minimal solution that can actually make a biggest impact. You don't need a costly and complex solution that needs to come in. And then you need to bring all this together with a design thinking and agility. Are you going to have still that standard 5th step you can query, or 6th step or 6 clicks to start your search? I don't think that will be valid. So that kind of a design thinking, where if you are integrating any of this technology, it immediately serves some purpose and some kind of a drill down approach, then I think that will be important. So design thinking and agile part of a development will be important. And when you tie all this together, that will be something awesome that you can start to see. And then, as I said, define, ideate, prototype, and test, and do this cycle faster. So that's something will help to build.
Mhm. Is experimentation a good idea then for engineers?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to just use it, try it, right, and see how it works. But again, I will go back and repeatedly say that when you experiment and take it out, you got to look at the output very critically and say, what is this telling me, and what are the limitations, what's wrong with it, what's correct with it, and how can I use it? Essentially, I think for, as an experimentation, what you find out is category usage, right? When can you use it? And there's been some enterprise stories out there. I won't mention any names or anything, but an attempt to use generative AI in a interactive way with a customer trying to order. It's probably one of the most critical steps in the customer interaction with a company, right? Customers trying to order something from you, and it didn't work very well. Right. But hey, it was I think it was a great experiment, right? It taught everybody, both inside and outside the company, some limitations of what it's good at, but right now what it's still not good at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Coming good overall in the sense of Gen AI itself, you will see it, and exactly if you're using regularly, you will see that answers are evolving even for that same platform. So something that you have asked, let's say a few months back versus you ask the same thing today, see drastic difference that has come to the answering it and how it has evolved, the Gen AI itself. So it's a good to see.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Yeah, it's constantly evolving right now, right? So you have to keep experimenting just to see the changes as well.
Yeah.
So teams that use it, obviously, you'll end up having engineers with different levels of AI literacy. Some may be well equipped with knowledge of AI algorithms, while maybe some are just using the tools. How do you ensure that there's collaboration, upskilling in the team?
So I'll go first on that question.
Please.
Yeah, so I actually think that's okay to have different levels of literacy, AI literacy within the team, and it's very natural. right? Within the organization or within a group of people to have that. And I think the parallel that I'll draw, and hopefully this parallel will work. The parallel I'll draw is if you think about how all of us use a car as a tool, right? For a vast majority of us, a car is just a transportation equipment that gets us, whether we even know how to drive a car or maybe we're just a passenger in a car. We just use it. We know how to use it to go from point A to point B. And that's the mission that it does for us. We don't, without needing to understand, I don't know, technical details of the car, like, how many cylinders is the engine, how many horsepower, and what's the compressor ratio of the engine? Is it powered by gas, diesel, electricity? Who cares? It's a car and it gets me from here to there. It's a tool that I know how to use, right? But within as an everyday user, I still have to understand the limitations of that tool for me to use it correctly, right? There's like social and legal boundaries of how can I use a car in, for example, speed limit. How fast should I be driving in?
Uh,
Some interruption
uh,
on.
Maybe
yeah,
past
there's some
life
interruption.
fitness also.
Yeah. Aditya, you want to take over?
Yeah, definitely. I think where Masa was leading was getting it the specific structure where you are looking at getting engineers who are in a way structured thinker and they have been professionally trained. But I will say GenAI is not only for engineers, although that is the topic that we want to discuss. Anybody with a smart acumen and logical thinking can do it. And for that, we will specialize towards the engineering towards the large, but starting step is anyway to start with a subject matter. Uh, if you are a subject matter expert, that is the step one where you essentially help to identify the problem and help generate the framework. If I rewind the tape, which is like 2 decades, then we saw the advent of enterprise resource planning or ERP softwares. Over there, software engineers were not only one, those were important, but also functional expert to implement HR process, to implement industrial floor process, all those came together. If you just step back and question, then you understand that software was definitely a key, but understanding that process and doing that correctly was something important as well. So I will say subject matter expert will still be more important or as important to what AI comes to, and that is the step one. Once you have that, then any application builder, whether it is software technology or whether it is a hardware who is developing an instrumentation or somebody medical professional who is helping to classify different types of drugs or those will come to play. So if you look at that, then essentially the steps that we talk, define, ideate, prototype, that will kind of follow what you have. So subject matter followed by this structured process of a development. And from there, you will get into mode where you will talk to large level model or LLMs that will be there, because that blocker is now gone and anybody can start to develop own application. If this you take it as a something summary that you want to do, then I think you have charted how to develop skill getting answered. First is a knowledge, right? So education, whether it is a formal, online, generated through mentorship, whether you work with an industry leader, I think all of them will come together. You have to continuously evolve. We just touched upon how your answer, which was asked few months back versus now, gets different answer or get more refined from LLM. I think that is where your continuous knowledge improvement comes. Second is the experience, which is on-job experience versus getting into internship to learn new. I will strongly promote whoever that is to do the internship, whether it is on-job, small thing or small initiative happening around LLM, because many of CIOs, CTOs have that they're chartered, were not from technology company to see what are the application of LLMs and develop that. So do that on-job experience or internship. Communication, collaboration never goes away. It is there because cross-team, talking to subject matter expert, another thing engineers need to do and build it from stakeholder. And you have to understand one thing, AI is not the only solution. So it is weaving that into the larger workflow. Even if you are disrupting whole industry, you will need to do multidisciplinary interactions with different parts of the tool, workflows, automation, and rely on a continuous improvement. So those are the skills I feel those are there, I think Masa is up again, so he can again
Mhm.
get into macro level where he's trying to make that point for the skills. Welcome
Mhm.
back.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Murphy's Law, right? Everything that can go wrong during session will. So my broadband at home just went down, so I'm back on my cell phone.
No problem.
But hey, it all comes down to, as an engineer, you got to be prepared and have redundancy ready. So here I am. So yeah, I just thought where was I? I was talking about the different. We were talking about different skill set. Are we still in the same question? The same topic?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, different levels of AI literacy within the organization. I was saying I think it's okay, and I was drawing the parallel to those of us that just use a car as a transportation device, we know how to use it, but we also have to understand inherent limitations of it, right? How fast can I drive under certain conditions, or if it's raining, what are some things that I can and can't do in a car? But if you're a mechanic and you have to understand the internal mechanics of a hard car, of how a car works, because you have to fix something that's broken, then obviously you need to know more about it. And I think generative AI is really the same thing. Vast majority of engineers, I think, just as a user of it, need to understand, how does it work? What are its limitations? How can I use it within the context of my role and objective that I'm trying to achieve? How can it aid? Now, and then there's going to be a different category of engineers that are really responsible for, like Aditya said a little earlier, refining the platform itself. Maybe you're tweaking the algorithm, maybe you're refining the model, maybe you're feeding additional information into the model so that it could give much more precise answers. For example, if you just ask a generic LLM model, how much taxes do I need to pay for a shoe that I want to buy in San Mateo, where I live in the United States, it'll just give you a very, very generic answer. But another group of engineers have fed into the model specific tax rate information about different, different parts of the world in the country. And so when I ask a refined model, how much taxes do I need to pay, it'll give me a much more specific answer. So there's different categories of engineers, within the context of their role, that they're responsible for doing that will require different levels of AI literacy. And I think that's just by design.
In the current times, if you just look at the ability to use and master AI tools, that's becoming very important. We've seen that with prompt engineering. What level of AI literacy should engineers aim to achieve, especially when they have to be competitive in the market?
One second, I'm just trying to make my. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me start taking this. So first of all, motivation to learn. Okay. Some people are curious, they get new phone and they will start using it. They get new gadget, they will start playing with it. And then there are few where my parents who started to use like a smartphone to now Android or iOS. That is because those other phones have stopped coming to them and all their friends are on certain thing. So if I look at from the macro level perspective, self-motivation versus secular level industry push, as I said, many of the CIOs, CTOs, and other industry leaders are getting pushed to find what are the right use cases of AI for their own organization, and can that generate additional revenue? Can that do something? And for startups, it is like trying to disrupt existing players. So it is coming from the three sides. So any engineer who is now joining the industry or already in the industry, or whether he or she is senior person, it becomes from their perspective unavoidable to learn generative AI and their capability. If you are going to use the heuristics of what it needs to do to apply the solution, the standard stick or litmus paper, then it is like whether it is cost effective, whether it is compliance and ethic, those are going to stay. But once you are derived those, then that is where your continuous learning can form as a habit. Because once you understood that you don't have alternative to learn, that is where I think will come. And Masa can add a point about how does he see for what we're talking. Over to you, Masa.
Yeah. I actually think the real answer to the question isn't about AI literacy at all. It's about it's about the it's really comes back to critical thinking. It's critical thinking, critical thinking, critical thinking, right? As use the tool for what it is, but it's going to give you a certain output, and you got to look at the output, use your subject matter expertise, and say, what is this telling me? What can I do with this data, right? And also dissect it to say, what is wrong with it? That analysis of the output, I think is super important. And then once you analyze the output for what it is, then you can continue to iterate on the output, right? Either feeding it back into the generative AI and refining it itself, or just take it as a starting point and again, just use your subject matter expertise to refine that output into something that is usable. But I think it really begins with two basic ingredients. One is critical thinking. You gotta apply critical thinking to the output, and you got to apply your subject matter expertise at it. You have to realize that because of hallucination, if you are not a subject matter expert in the on the topic that you're using generative AI for, it may be wrong. And you have to know when to recognize that and avoid the pitfalls of it.
In academic settings, multidisciplinary approaches are always popular. What about in this case for engineers in the AI? Is that important? And how do you even develop those kind of skills? Wants
Let-
to
I mean, I think, hello, can you hear me? Okay.
we
So
can hear you. Yeah, I was gonna, yeah, go ahead.
I-
Go ahead.
first, let's consider a few concrete examples, right? So there are multidisciplinary and other part of technology. If you look at some industries, something similar to search or advertisement and content dispersion, I think those industries will be there, which are the first one which will be impacted. And that is where you have to be at the leading front edge of what you're going to do to adopt those kind of abilities. Next comes is other parts which are there, which will be laggard or which didn't have earlier time ability to go into the custom AI based or application of AI type of a solution. And that is where you will be there. So now it comes to acknowledging your exact role that you want to do and set expectation based on that. Few minutes back, we discussed about what is going to be a role, whether you are a product owner who is pioneering new solution, you are a developer or operator who is looking to adopt AI and bringing ideas to life, versus you are the gatekeeper who is looking for legal, ethical boundaries, and then you can actually help to build on top of that. Once you are done that, you need to, as we have said multiple times, apply your critical thinking, apply your curiosity, where you adopt and iterate fast, where you are helping to build, define, ideate, prototype, and using the right set of tools, whether those are available commercially or open source, get that, and then adopting the new platform for good amount of verification and validation. That is one of the key steps to avoid hallucination and those kind of things. So that is where I think it will come together.
Masa?
Oh yeah, and I think it's just double up on all the points that Aditya made on this one. I think really comes down to continuous learning, mentorship on the job. I think it'll be a repeat of everything he's already said.
Sure.
How do you think, especially when they'll have to really balance out engineers assert their importance in terms of problem solvers in the era of AI, how do you think they're going to strike a balance between human intuition and AI-driven solutions? Aditya?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, what Masa was talking about, we have generative AI, but this is not a common artificial intelligence that all computer scientists and our utopian or dystopian movies are showing. So we're still not there. So definitely human intuition still stays the strong. You need to be subject expert to understand output that is coming from such kind of AI, where it is not taking you in a completely opposite direction, and practically understanding the bias. Same amount of data can actually help you say and make a different statement. For example, if road accidents have reduced by N number, you can still present that data saying that it is still double digit, but whether it is double digit to overall number, then it could be less versus more. That something is there from the content and other perspective. So all those things comes to play where we are looking at things, then you have human intuition and human knowledge that is not getting challenged. So I'm perfectly confirmed about that. But only thing is that application of it and the adoption, because AI is learning based on the open knowledge that we have on the web, and engineers are working hard to adopt that to their standard. I think that is where the race to fast and visible changes to our lives are coming. You can see it is getting affecting all the industry, but to start with, it will address and affect larger scale industries vis-a-vis technology and media and those, and then it will start to percolate. So staying relevant, develop the skills, understand where you're standing, and all the points that we talked from subject matter, I think that is where I will be looking to. But keep learning, that is, and keep your curiosity on.
Yeah,
Masa, maybe go ahead,
yeah, go ahead,
please.
go ahead, Gil.
No, I was going to ask you, like, how do you continuously learn and adapt? Because these AI models are constantly changing, they're just getting better. So, what would your suggestion be? Should they just keep experimenting, or should they maybe go for special classes, certifications? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think, learning about the internal mechanics is obviously all of, as engineers, learning about the internal mechanics, how does it work, will help you with the usage, even as a user, right? I mean, you got to understand, if you understand how compilers and operating system work, it makes you a better, coder, and you can write more efficient code. And I think in the same way, I think it's the same thing here. You take some classes, read some books. There's a lot of white papers, you could just search about it. You can ask the ChatGPT itself, tell me about the internal mechanics of how you work. It'll give you a lot of information. But I think, understanding how all this works in theory is will only get you to a certain level, right? I think really it's about adapting usage of it within the context of your role, and just keep iterating, right? And then as you keep iterating, your usage of it will get better into context. One, because the tool itself is getting better, as we mentioned several times, and it's giving you better and better and more detailed answer over time. And second is your usage of it. You're refining, you'll be able to refine your usage of it within the context of your role, and get better at it. How do you leverage it? So I think it's really just, yeah, learn about it, but really use it, iterate and adapt quickly. Yeah.
Shilpa?
Yeah. Also, if you look at, looking at the job market, especially for freshers who are coming out of engineering colleges, if you can talk about how will the job market for engineers evolve with the changing skill requirements in the AI era? How is it going to be in India, especially India has a huge number of engineering graduates coming out of colleges each year.
Aditya, you want to go
Yeah.
first? Please, Masa, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, go. Okay, yeah. As far as the job market, I definitely think both sides, employers and employees, whether you're fresher or experienced engineers, really need to embrace the fact that generative AI is here and exists as a tool. If you try to pretend, if any of us try to pretend that it doesn't exist and it's not here, you're gonna be left behind, and others who have adopted to and learned how to use it will very quickly take over, what you could have done. I'll kind of draw a parallel. Again, I think you're probably recognizing that I like to sort of talk express my points through parallel examples. I'm on the board of my kid's school, and we were talking about where generative AI fits in the context of teaching, right? And people that are scared of the technology, their first intuitive reaction is, oh no, kids can't use generative AI to do school homework, right? They're not going to learn that way. Well, if you can't adapt to the technology and figure out how to leverage it, you're going to be left behind. But on the other hand, if you and I think looking backwards is easier to understand. If you rewind the clock 10 years ago, right? Teachers are probably saying the same thing about Google, right? Oh, kids shouldn't use Google to do their homework. They need to look at their textbook and the material, classroom material to figure out the answer to all their questions. But I think over time, technology has forced a change in the way teachers use technology, how subjects are taught. And today, use of technologies like Google is built in to the way that teaching is done, right? Use Google as a tool to do research on a subject that perhaps you're writing a paper about, right? And just make sure to cite example. Again, there are social rules, right? Make sure to cite examples and sources of where you got this information, and know that Google search result could be wrong too, right? So I think the same thing with Gen AI. Now, so think about so how does that impact it? So getting back to today and job market, how does generative AI impact the job market? Let's just sort of look at the interview process, right? I think if you ignore generative AI in the interview process, you're probably doing the same thing teachers are doing about saying, hey, students shouldn't use Gen AI or Google. So just food for thought, right? This is just me sort of brainstorming and talking. Sort of think about how you can use generative AI within an interview. Embrace it, right? So maybe instead of asking a developer to write code during an interview, maybe you sit down together and say, hey, let's use, this is the problem. Show me, let's use Gen AI to generate code, the answer to this question. And then once you do that, then you can sort of have a conversation about, hey, let's take a look at what's wrong with this code, or where how does code write, and then you can start launching a conversation from there, right? Saying like, okay, hey, let's say I want to hyper optimize this code for CPU cycles because this code needs to run in an environment, very low energy computational environment. So what would need to change? Or maybe it needs to work in a micro environment where memory is really expensive still, and you say like, I want to hyper optimize this for memory footprint. How would that need to change? Now within the answer, question and within that iteration, maybe the candidate will go back to using generative AI to refine the output, or maybe they just refine it themselves. Who knows, right? Who knows how the conversation will go? But my point is, and this is just an example, I'm just thinking about it, right? That my point is, if you embrace the fact that generative AI is here as a tool, you can incorporate it into whatever you're doing, including, for example, the interview process. And I could just go on and on about all sorts of different examples in the context of your role as an employee trying to get something done. How can you use generative AI and so forth? But again, I think my bottom line is embrace it, use it.
Aditya? You're unmute,
You're on
Aditya.
mute.
What Masa said is completely aligned with what anybody, including any professional in India, they need to start thinking and they need to start doing. This is one of the technologies where we'll see equilibrium coming to play very soon. We had years of mobility, we had years of Web 2.0 and so on, and it took some time for all that penetration. This is the technology, because of all those infra and other things in place, it is going to happen fast. So every organization will have a direct impact for customer experience, for revenue, and for growth. All various combinations are going to be available for business owners to manipulate and create that impact. And this is not only for existing players, but this also is available for small companies, which is very small and unheard, that kind of a scenario that can come to. When engineers keep that in mind, it generates the sense of urgency for them. And that is where the next step of realization is a supply and demand. Definitely in, for example, developing country like India, demonstrating your skills with certification is important, but that it is not an excuse to not having the your multifaceted development that is need to come. If you are from different industry, unlike earlier part of career, where many non-com science grads joined the technology industry, learned programming language, and they made a beautiful career out of that. This time, once again, SME subject matter experts will be in demand. There is going to be a lot of buyers that this LLM bring for commercially viable, successful product. So it will need a certain level of a skill where you need to be able to build what you need and then get it without any strong bias. So I will still recommend what we discuss is build upon your knowledge, formal online mentorship, keep searching for that experience, whether it is internship and so on. That needs to help. But all this needs to generate your critical thinking or creative prompt generative, what Masa said. Both sides, be it employer-employee, they need to adopt and start acknowledging that something like this exists, whether it is Copilot from GitHub, which allows to develop a code or which allows to analyze the resume, which allows to analyze data and so on. Analyze from both perspective, analytical and subjective. Those two are very distinct things. Analytical will give you perspective in terms of what data is presenting, and subjective is its accuracy, hallucination, and those kind of agents that will come. And know your strength. If you're a programmer, you learn how to use it and build on top of that, develop a pipeline in cloud and other thing. Versus if you're a subject matter expert, think about what problem you can use this to solve. It's not only about a language, but it generates image, it understands knowledge, it can verify and validate it for real world examples. So that is what I think skills will help for ever-changing market condition, be it India or be it US.
So what about India specific? There, do you see anything, any way you can predict what's going to happen in the next 5 years?
Prediction is a big word, so I will leave it to big industry leaders. But from my perspective, as a startup builder and then working with a large public corporations and other, I think this is something secular. So it's not that it is available in the US and not available in, let's say, small village somewhere. AI is going to be available. It's for you to have as a playground. You start building upon it. And as Masa said, both sides, employer and employee, are taking it seriously. It's still not exactly open on the level that Masa said, where I will like to interview candidate with, hey, use the prompt and show me you write the code and at least help me build it. Because it may very well happen that my company legally doesn't allow me to use ChatGPT or let's say GitHub Copilot. That's possibility. But I think that is where it is. So addressing a problem and iterating fast. If you are a startup, you will have a heydays. If you are an enterprise, you will have certain level of a compliance and other things to go through. But your free time is yours. So if you are in enterprise, you still can learn and still can create that account within 2 minutes and start playing with it. So I don't see India will have very differential treatment. I'm excusing part where we are talking about building those there. That is very, very skewed mathematical and com science oriented division. But very few companies will be doing it considering prohibitive cost of that. But that is very small percentage. I'm talking all from usage of general purpose LLM that we are seeing, or specialized purpose of LLM. That is what I'm more focused on.
I think the prevalence of it around the world is definitely a key point, right? I mean, you could sort of think about it from an India perspective, but on the other, just like this call, right? Hey, you know, I'm actually halfway around the world from the rest of you right now, and just doing a call over Zoom. You know, Zoom has been a great equalizer in terms of the ability to have a meeting instantaneously. Well, so is generative AI. It's a tool that's available to everybody, and it has to be recognized that if used appropriately, it can be a great equalizer in terms of a person's ability to have access to it and use it to achieve a goal.
Coming to both of you, what's your advice for engineers and students looking to take up engineering in the future? So,
I will go first, and
go for it.
so this is where I think it gets exciting because it kind of reminds the early part of career, where grabbing the book from library, whether it is employee or whether it is a university, that was something key to get to learn something new. Books and other things were not very, very readily. So you used to spend time. Now with OpenAI, just one login, you have access to everything that you need to look at technology. You are developing skills which you already are doing very smartly in the college and university. As we visit them for recruitment, I think this is very, very well articulated generation in terms of how and what. I think they need to apply that specialized thinking to any problem that they are solving, and based on that they can start to generate. Again, I'm seeing a lot of difference in with respective of AI, where new freshers are connecting with the industry when you visit college and campus and try to talk to them. Uh, so I will put ounce on them as well. Don't wait for somebody to come and talk to you in your college or campus. Go outside, find your network from your relatives, friends, family, and get to develop that connect in the industry. Try to understand. There are a lot of new and good news channel, including this kind of a podcast, which brings a lot of fresh thinking. Don't accept it on a face value. Try it, look what you can get. And that is what amalgamates as your experience, whether it is something that you are doing before the job or you are in a first few years of your job where you are accumulating. So don't get scared of trying and failing. I think that is what the key going to be.
Masa?
Yeah, all I can say is don't ignore generative AI. You got to learn how to use it as a tool for yourselves. And as you do that, I think a big part of success is, one, you got to have the subject matter expertise on the subject in which you're trying to. So you're understanding your own role, what are you trying to achieve, and what and what are you trying to do with it. And then I can't stress this enough. I can't stress this enough. Apply critical thinking to the output, and then figure out what can you do with that output, right? And also, by the way, recognize that if you don't do that and you just take the output of generative AI and then just use it as your work, right? The audience that you're working with, they're familiar with Gen AI too, and they can spot an output of Gen AI from a mile away, right? And so you don't want to come across as the person that's just using generative AI for you to be lazy and replace what you did, right? But again, use it as a tool for yourself to achieve what you're trying to do. Use it as a starting point. Use it as an accelerator of what you're trying to do. One thing that's for sure, and I can't, again, I do realize I'm being a little bit repetitive, is that great problem solving skill is a key component of being able to achieve that. Because if you don't think about the output, hallucination that I talked about earlier, and other shortcomings of generative AI will come back and bite you, right? So really, really think about the output, and think about what are you trying to do with it, and how can you use the output, and then use it.
We have this one question from.
So we have a question from
Go ahead.
Karthik. Sorry. So we have a question from Karthik Suresh. He's curious to know, can Gen AI do the work of a data analyst or a data scientist today?
So
Again, I'll just kind of double up on what I've been saying. I think it can be I think, this is me thinking, right? It can be a great accelerator to what you as a data scientist is trying to achieve, right? Well, maybe it's the first couple of initial passes at understanding the data, looking for patterns, or what Gen AI can see that you're not seeing, right? But can it replace you? No, I absolutely think it cannot. Not yet, at least. Not right now.
Mm-hmm.
Aditya, you have any other thoughts?
I think if we take a little structured dive into what really data analyst job means, okay? There are various jobs. When you are junior, you might be just working on data collection. You may be tagging separate portions of the input. It could be physical input scanned into the system, or it could be from the web. Then you will be getting data collection. whatever data you collect, that will be cleansed, and then it is taken to analyze and interpretation. If you look at these various steps, without AI as well, you know that you can write bots, which are known as a technical term for going across, crawling the web and collecting the data. That is something done irrespective whether it was AI or not. So Google had done that, and a lot of search engine did it for decades. But when it comes to question of a cleaning and understanding, language follows a particular semantic, and that is where it starts to become available. In my earlier days of a AI startup, I said that first we came up with the word that was coined like a Brexit. Before that, in a literature, there was no word called Brexit. But since it came as a proper noun, everybody who understands a language, they started to know that it is a Brexit, means something proper noun related, and they started to automatically use that within the one or two conversations. So that is where the cleaning and preparation of the data can come in. Now, that is one place I see that data analyst will get benefited. Final step of analysis and interpretation, if I'm using Copilot or if I'm using tools like a Bito, I will start to see that, yes, there is an opportunity where it can provide me Python code to analyze that faster, and I can kind of get it done to visualize it. But I still need to navigate that in the steps and then do it. Whether my manager is going to do it for me and then my job becomes redundant, it's unlikely. But the throughput on the individual level is surpassing than what it was on earlier days. So if you look at a data collection, cleaning, analysis, presentation, and so on, I think that is where it becomes assisted tool. The point that we are making is the current thing that we are seeing. Whether it becomes completely automated, it all depends on how smartly those requirements could be explained as a workflow to GenAI, because I'm sure somebody will be working on that to cross connect all these dots and use AI to generate finished product or finished report based on your input. But is it very near? I'm not sure whether I can predict that.
Yeah. But just kind of double up on one thing Aditya said. Throughput will increase because of it as a tool. Yes, as long as you're using it correctly, right? If you don't use it correctly, in fact, it'll slow you down, right? Because it's wrong, and then you got to go. Once you figure out it's wrong, you got to go back and redo it again. And when you redo it, there's nothing more complicated than trying to debug something that a machine generated, right? It's not. It's even worse than trying to read somebody else's code. And so at the time of creation, you got to be able to do it right the first time.
Well,
Right.
thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this webinar, especially to Avalara, Masa, Aditya. It's been absolutely fascinating conversation. Thanks to our audience as well. Everyone, take care.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.